In the 1980s, Europe accounted for 45% of global shipbuilding. Today, this is 6%. So we can speak about a big crisis in this sector. And joined here with me today at the Maritime Economy Forum in Gdynia is Mr. Christophe Tytgat, Secretary General and CEO of Sea Europe. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So please tell me, what is behind this crisis? We've seen a huge drop in the last several dozen years in shipbuilding in Europe. Who has taken over the market?
We have indeed, since the 1980s, seen a dramatic decline in Europe's share in global shipbuilding. The first to take over our market, or let's say the first biggest competitors we had, was Japan. Then in the, let's say, end of the 1980s, 1990s, it was South Korea. Today it's predominantly China. And there is a reason for that. The reason for that is very simple. That is that Europe actually has treated its shipbuilding industry as a normal economic sector.
And it shouldn't be.
And it shouldn't be. And our competitors in Asia have never done it. Our competitors in Asia have always treated shipbuilding as a strategic sector, which is largely driven not by the market alone, but also by government policies. And in Europe, we didn't do that. So that's one element. The other element, of course, is that we know that in Asia they use a lot of subsidies. Since let's say the early 2000s, we don't have subsidy policies anymore. Whether that is a good thing or not on a European context, we can discuss that. But one thing is for sure, that is that a ship owner today that wants to build a ship in Europe will pay 30 to 40% more than the same ship somewhere in Asia, South Korea or China. And that is, of course, to a large extent because they are still subsidizing. And since the crisis of 2008, so the financial and economic crisis of 2008, we have seen that European banks, commercial banks, have stepped out of ship financing because they consider that market as too risky, whilst China has stepped into that market and they are giving very favorable ship financing to European ship owners and to other ship owners, and we cannot compete to that. And the problem is, and that's the third element, that is that contrary to cars and bikes and all that, we are talking a lot about electric vehicles in Europe and the competitive distortion from China. For such a product, Europe can impose a tax so as to level the playing field. But you cannot do that for ships because ships are not imported. Ships are operating in international waters. So we don't have actually an instrument that helps us to bridge the 30 to 40% price gap that we have today with Asia. If you take all that together, that's why we are in the situation that we are in today.
So if we can't impose tariffs, then how would these subsidies, perhaps on an EU level, influence the market?
Well, the question, of course, is subsidy really the right way to go? The second thing is, can you do anything beyond subsidization? I think there is one thing that is very clear. Already in 1988, the European Commission had identified the crisis situation that the European shipbuilding industry was in at that time. And already at that time, they considered subsidies not as the right way forward. The reason is, you can subsidize, but your competitor can even more subsidize. I believe that if we only look at the price, we will always have a competitive problem. I think the real question now for Europe is we need to have a competition that goes beyond price. So we have to look at the life cycle of a ship. We need to look at all the societal impacts, benefits, disadvantages of placing an order in Europe versus placing an order in Asia. And we have the green agenda. We want to make shipping a sustainable mode of transport. The problem is that, or the problem has been, that with the European Green Deal, we were only focusing on the climate aspect, rightly so, but we didn't focus on the second aspect, economic growth. And I hope that with the new European Commission, what they now call the Clean Industrial Deal, we will have the balance between the climate agenda and the business agenda. And for shipbuilding and shipping, that should mean finding ways to stimulate investments by ship owners or from ship owners into shipyards and equipment from Europe. That can be partly bridging the price gap, but already stimulating the investments, taking out the risks in maritime investments can already help a lot. And this is a different ball game than just subsidies alone.
But do you think this is possible, having a commission that will not be so different than the previous one?
I think there is one. There will be a new European Commission. Of course, the president of the European Commission will be the same, but
and the parties governing as well.
There will be a lot of new people, but there is one major difference between this European Commission and the previous one. That is that under this European Commission, one of the commissioners, the Transport Commissioner, has received a very clear mandate from the Commission President von der Leyen to issue a so-called maritime industrial strategy. This was not the case under the previous Commission, and this was actually not even the case under the previous Commissions. So for the very first time, we have actually a new element, a new concept that we have to translate into practice. But there is a maritime industrial strategy on the table, on the political table. And in that sense, this commission for us, shipyards and equipment manufacturers, will already be different than all the others that we have had in the past.
And what about current crises that we have seen in the past years? How have they influenced the maritime economy handling? I'm speaking about, for instance, the COVID-19 pandemic or the war in Ukraine, which is affecting this part of Europe.
Well, starting from the pandemic, we have seen that the pandemic has had a huge impact on Europe's success story in shipbuilding, and that's cruise vessels. Due to the pandemic, cruise vessels could not operate anymore, and many of the orders were delayed over time. So that has been a huge problem for that market. The energy crisis, of course, impacts the equipment manufacturers and the shipyards because prices have become more expensive. But we have also seen a number of what I would call unfortunate political initiatives. If you take the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is a tax on steel, especially tax on steel that is imported from outside Europe, steel, Chinese steel, for instance, will become more expensive for a European shipyard, but the same Chinese steel used by a Chinese shipyard to build a ship that afterwards will be operated in European waters will not be tackled or will not have that additional tax. So, that also didn't really help. But indeed, the energy crisis has had an impact. At the same time, it also creates an opportunity. The request to shift from fossil fuels to sustainable alternative fuels has of course become more pressing than it was the case before. And there is certainly a role for the European Commission and for the member states, but also for the industry. There is a very nice opportunity that the crisis has actually created for us. So there has indeed been a big crisis. I think there is one lesson that we have learned from the crisis, that is that Europe has become too dependent, European shipyards have become too dependent on few niche markets. So if something goes wrong in those niche markets, you really have a problem. And the other lesson is that we have become, and we knew it already, but we have seen the impact, we have become too dependent from foreign shipyards for ships that are operating into European waters. And in that sense, the crisis has actually also been an eye-opener, and it has helped to have now a discussion on the maritime industrial strategy.
So you think, taking into account that the maritime economy is considered a security issue now, also when it comes to, for instance, military shipments, there is a chance for a change here? There is a chance for a change.
Of course, the naval capacity, the military industrial capacity, building more Navy ships, has of course become a very important, element. We know that for many years there were always decreases in the budgets for defense, and that also impacted the military shipbuilding. That has clearly changed, but there is also a positive knock-on effect for the commercial shipbuilding, because one thing we have in Europe, that, for instance, the United States doesn't have. We have what we call this cross-fertilization between commercial and naval shipbuilding, meaning that we have companies, shipyards that are building Navy ships and that are building commercial ships. And the innovations from the naval sector can benefit the commercial sector, but also the other way around. And that the US doesn't have. One other country that has it and that has really understood the importance of having commercial and naval shipbuilding together is China. So indeed, the security element has helped the defense side, but also the commercial side.
So
and
we should follow in those footsteps.
Yeah.
Simply.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this was Christopher Tytgat, Secretary General and CEO of Sea Europe. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And
Pleasure.
we were speaking at the Maritime Economy Forum in Gdynia.